What's up guys, my name's Brandon and today Apple released iOS 18 Beta 7 for registered developers and soon for public beta testers. Now along with this release, we also got the 7th beta of iPadOS 18, watchOS 11, macOS Sequoia, tvOS 18, and visionOS 2. But of course in this video we're talking all about iOS 18 Beta 7. So starting off with the size of this update, I was pretty surprised to see such a small update size going from beta 6 to beta 7, but it was under 400 megabytes, so 377.5 megabytes on my iPhone 15 Pro Max. I would expect a small size if you're coming from beta 6, but of course a larger size if you're coming from a prior beta. So let's go and check out the build number for this new update. And if we go to settings, general, about 18.0, the new build is 22A5346A. So we do have an A at the end of the build number, which does indicate we are very near the final release. And if we go back and take a look at the modem firmware, it remains at 2.16.06. So the modem firmware for the iPhone 15 series is unchanged from beta 6 to beta 7. All right, so now what's new here in iOS 18 beta 7? And as we talked about in the beginning, this is a very small update. So given that information, it's always pretty easy to assume that this is going to be mostly bug fixes included in this update. We're not going to see any type of major features or changes pretty much from here on out in these iOS 18 betas. So don't set your expectations too high because we're not expecting to see anything major, at least until the new iPhones get released, which by that point, we're pretty much going to be in the final release anyways. So the first thing I want to talk about is if we go into the phone application, and if you go to the recents tab right here, you'll notice that we still do not have the call button on the far right side. So that means that if you were to tap on somebody's name in your recents, you will call them. So this is a feature that was changed in an earlier iOS 18 beta. You were able to tap on the person's name right here and it would not accidentally call them. There was a button over here to the right where the eye is that had a phone icon. And actually, if you search in your recents, you will see that we still have that phone icon over there to the right. So that's what I was hoping to see in this beta, that would show up in the main recents tab, but it still, only shows the eye there, and we have this little button now in search. So I thought that was a bug, but it might not be at this point. However, we do have a good fix for the control center. So I tested this multiple times off camera, but I rebooted my device 3 times and my control center icons did not get removed or they did not get reset. So if you remember from my iOS 18 beta 6 video, I had a bug that I left in the video where it completely eliminated one of my screens here on my control center. So I configured everything to my liking, and then when I rebooted, everything was gone and I just lost everything for good, even after rebooting again. But that has been fixed with beta 7. So control center buttons no longer disappear, and also the duplicates appear to be fixed as well. So for some people in iOS 18 beta 6, the screen sharing specifically right here would automatically populate on their device even after they removed it. So it seems like the control center is just getting better overall here, pretty much every beta, but it's really at its peak here with beta 7, it seems. And it's not just because of that, it also just seems smoother overall when I scroll between the pages right here, and also when I tap and hold and go to add a new control, when I go through here, it's still a little bit choppy, but before it was very choppy in pretty much every iOS 18 beta beforehand. So it is a little bit better now. Now, something I noticed, by the way, on the second page is that some of these icons were the ones that got removed in beta 6. So, like this contrast icon right here. So if I tap on that, it changes, the contrast there, or it inverts, I should say, the colors. So that was something I added in beta 6, but it was in the page that got removed. So it popped up back here in beta 7. Also, if you go into your iCloud section and settings and go to save to iCloud, some people are seeing the clock show up here, and that seems to be something new that iCloud is syncing, but you can see I don't have anything there for clock under iCloud, but some users reported seeing that as something new in this section. I've also noticed some improvements in Safari, so if you go to a web page and tap right here, I now see summaries for home pages and not just for specific articles. So that did not happen for me on beta 6, at least it didn't pop up on my device, and it seems to be popping up more frequently, even on home pages now. Also, when you go to hide distracting items, this seems to be working better in beta 7 than what we saw in beta 6. So the animation seems to be a little bit smoother and everything just works a little bit better. The glyph icons and the text and everything remain the same. It just performs a little bit better than previous betas, which is welcomed because these are two awesome changes coming here with iOS 18. I've also had a few people ask me if RCS has been added for additional carriers, and that does not appear to be the case here with beta 7, and I would not expect that to be the case until after iOS 18 is released to the public, because again, a lot of this has to do with the carrier itself and not necessarily Apple at this stage in these iOS 18 beta. So if you're still waiting on RCS for your carrier, that's your carrier's fault, and they're going to need to update, on their end. And again, we probably won't see that until after iOS 18, the final release, is out. Now, we also have some information here from Mark Gurman, who said that the latest iOS 18 seed, which is this one, iOS 18 beta 7, is final, other than features tied to the new hardware. So what this means is that we're not expected to see any new features in iOS 18 until the public release, which of course will include, the iPhone 16 features that are being saved until those get announced. So we'll probably see those in the RC build, at least in the code. And of course, when the new iPhones come out, we'll see some additional features in iOS 18. But as far as any other device, iPhone 15s and lower, we're not going to see any new features or changes until, the final public release. But that is not to say that beta 7 is the final beta release. We're just going to get bug fixes from here on out. Now, speaking of bug fixes, we do have some release notes here for beta 7, and there are a few things changed from beta 6, not too much, but we do finally have a fix for this bug right here that was a known issue in beta 6 that said upgrading from iOS 18 beta 5 to 18.1 beta results in a photos library rebuild. We also have a resolved issue under app intents. There's a known issue with a workaround for Swift 6. So it says developers who update their projects to use Swift 6 might have issues with their apps, which can lead to app crashes when executing a variety of HealthKit API calls. But aside from that, everything else in the release notes remains the same as what we saw with beta 6. Now, as far as the performance goes on iOS 18 beta 7, everything does seem a bit smoother, again, especially in the control center, like I mentioned earlier, when scrolling through the different pages, and also when going to add a new control and scrolling quickly on this interface, it does seem to be a bit better, and especially with search results, it's not near as laggy as it was in previous betas. So definitely feels smoother here on beta 7, which is expected. We do have an A at the end of the build number, which again does usually indicate that we are very close to a final release. So the performance that you're seeing here on beta 7 will be very similar, if not the same, as what we see in the official release of iOS 18. And I did go ahead and run a Geekbench 6 test, and we scored a 2824 on the single core and a 6888 on the multi-core. Now, as far as the battery life goes, I'm currently sitting at 76%. So you'll have to go back to the beginning and tell me what I was, starting with. That's a good way to gauge the battery life, just from the get-go. But overall, I would not really expect a major jump in battery life here, going from beta 6 to beta 7, because beta 6 had pretty good battery life for me on all devices. So battery life, I'm not expecting it to get any worse, but I would just limit expectations if you're expecting it to fix your battery drain issues. It could, but at this point, it doesn't seem as likely, but we could see a jump with the RC when that does get released, the release candidate build. And speaking of that RC, let's talk about what to expect next from Apple. So let's go into our calendar right here. So this is where it gets a little bit tricky because of Mark Gurman's tweet, who said that this is essentially the final build. So, in terms of new features and changes. So I think that we still will see a beta 8 release, because for the past few years, Apple has released a beta 8. And I think if they were not to release a beta 8, then we would not have gotten beta 7 until next week. So with that in mind, I would expect to see beta 8 next week on the week of August 26th. And then after that, we're going to skip the week of September 2nd, and then we will get an RC on the week of September 9th, most likely on September 10th, which is the date I predicted months ago when I had my original prediction. So we'll see if that comes true or not, but that is my, guess at this point in time. Now, as far as iOS 18.1 goes, I've had a lot of questions about iOS 18.1. We could see a beta release for that this week. However, we could very easily also be on a 2-week release schedule for iOS 18.1. So we might see the beta 3 this week, or we might be waiting until next week to see that third beta. And the reason for that is because we're not expecting to see iOS 18.1 get released to the public, the final release, until mid to late October. So again, it's 50-50 at this point if Apple's going to release 18.1 beta 3 this week, or if they're going to wait until next week. We'll just have to wait and see what Apple does. So anyways, that is iOS 18 beta 7. I did not want to drag this video out and talk about a bunch of random things because there's really not a lot going on here in iOS 18 beta 7. So I wanted to get this out to let you know it's out, and we do have a couple of bug fixes as well. So anyways, if you enjoyed this video, as always, I would appreciate if you give it a thumbs up. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on all of my iOS 18 coverage coming over the next few months. But anyways, guys, thanks again for watching, and I'll see you soon.